Beyond Coding.
Welcome to Beyond Coding, a dive into the world of successful people in IT. From your sponsors, Xebia, creating digital leaders. Here's your host, Patrick Akil.
First of all, thanks for being here. Happy to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good, man. How's your trip been so far?
It's been good. It's actually been quite a crazy roller coaster of a ride.
Yeah.
Especially traveling in the COVID times.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of admin and a lot of red tape to get around, and I've had to do a number of COVID tests, which have been quite uncomfortable. I don't know if you've had those with.
I've done 0, surprisingly.
Yeah, they stick the swab up your nose.
For sure.
It's very very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been exciting. It's obviously an adventure to be a part of, and I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome, man. So what you told me before the show is that you've been here since May.
Yes.
And that traveling was completely fine. You could come into the country, no problem.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, a bunch of COVID tests to get on the plane, and then traveling. The plane was really empty.
Yeah.
I think there's very few people actually traveling, especially from that side of the world to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And so it was nice. I mean, I had a whole row to myself,
Yeah, I can
which
imagine.
was nice on the plane. Getting first class experience in an
Really?
economy seat.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, then everything's been smooth since then. I had to quarantine for 10 days on arriving here.
Yeah.
And I mean, usually when you travel to a different country, you want to go and see the sights and see all the beautiful places. But now you're stuck in your
Indoors.
little room for 10 days,
Yeah.
which was not that great. But at least it gave a time to sort of relax and
Settle
ontspan.
in. Yeah, exactly. That's good.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to move continents even?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a story behind that, but the first one starts off with my grandfather was from the Netherlands, and in about 1950 he moved to South Africa to work on the mines, and through that my whole family was able to get a Dutch passport or Dutch citizenship. Yeah. And so it has always been a part of one of my dreams to move to the Netherlands, and so just never sort of had the opportunity. And then my wife, who's actually still in South Africa, she got accepted to study at the Vrije Universiteit.
That's good.
Yeah, in Amsterdam.
Nice.
And so we took it as, okay, well, great. This is a perfect opportunity for us to make the move across. And so we decided to take that step. And I started looking for work, and ended up here.
Nice. But she got accepted before you started looking for work?
Yes.
Okay. So that was kind of the catalyst that was like, all right, then we're going to move, you and me.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
take that step.
Yeah.
So then how do you normally look for a job in the Netherlands? Is it any different than how it would be in South Africa?
I don't know. I think it's quite similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So how I went about it was I started on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And did a lot of research, reached out to a few recruiters, and sort of that process was pretty smooth. I think tech jobs in general are in quite high demand at the moment. And so it was a nice process, and I think it's pretty similar to how you go about it in South Africa.
Yeah. How many conversations did you have? How many like actual technical coding challenges did you do and all that stuff?
I actually only did one technical challenge.
Really? That's good.
So the first company I interviewed was Xebia, and that's the company that I ended up joining. So
nice.
I had 4 interviews.
Yeah.
The interview process was, it's obviously quite long, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience.
Had you had any other experience through remote interviews?
No, this is actually the first time I've actually done a full remote interview.
Yeah. How was that?
It's different. Like you can't communicate like you usually do face to face. I think especially me, I sort of thrive off of seeing someone else's body language.
Exactly.
And so the way that they express themselves to me, I sort of feed off of that. And I think I can read people like that. And so you sort of adjust your interview based on that. And obviously when it's fully remote, you don't have any of that. And so you have to look at their eyes or something or the tone of their voice to understand sort of where they're coming from. And I think also with what makes that quite challenging is that it's a different culture as well. Yeah. So, I mean, now you've got, it's all virtual, but it's also you trying to see what the culture is like. How do you respond to interview questions when it's a different culture, even a different language as well?
Yeah. What are some of the most notable differences you've noticed?
Well, so far, I think the Dutch are known to be quite direct.
Exactly.
So you can definitely pick that up. I think in South Africa, people sort of beat around the bush a bit more.
Okay.
But in the Netherlands, they get to the point and tell you what they think, which is great actually, because it's nice to know where you stand with someone.
Exactly.
And when my wife was actually interviewing to study at the Vrije Universiteit, she also was interviewed by 2 lecturers there.
Okay.
And usually you would expect an interview to go something like, okay, well, what are some of your strengths and weaknesses? So we prepared all those kind of questions.
Yeah.
But the lecturers started off straight away saying, well, these are where we think your weaknesses are. And then they listed them out.
You know.
Yeah. And so they listed them out and said, these are your weaknesses. So how are you going to actually benefit the university? And so she was quite taken aback by that.
Yeah. Were they right even? Or was it just
they were right.
Okay.
And so it's actually good because they did their research and saw where she needed to improve before coming, which is actually great to have instead of arriving here and getting a big shock. I was like, oh, I'm actually very behind in these areas.
Yeah, that's good. She knows what she's getting into then.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was an interview process for a university like that as well.
It's a master's degree program, so I think it's a bit of a selective program. So I'm assuming that's why
they're being a bit more critical.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So then you landed the job, obviously. Did you fly over immediately? What kind of accommodations did you need to make?
So I gave 2 months notice at my previous company.
Yeah.
So after accepting the offer here, I had about 2 months to prepare and get everything ready.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, we need to sort out all our admin on South Africa side. So that was telling our landlords that we're moving out, packing up all our furniture, selling a lot of our furniture. We sold most of it actually, selling our 2 cars. And then after that, we'd packed up, and that was now by the end of April.
Yeah.
By the end of March. And then we moved to my in-laws down in Durban, and we stayed there for about a month before flying. And so then I needed to arrange a bunch of stuff to come up here. Firstly, being my wife's residence permit application. So we needed to do all that kind of admin. And getting documents out of South Africa's government systems is a bit challenging at times.
I can imagine, I've heard that before.
Yeah, so we had to sort all that out. And then, booking flights and flying across.
Man. Yeah. So at some point you were actually like, I have nothing anymore, no furniture, no cars.
Exactly. So you're used to having the freedom of going wherever you want, and then you now have no car, so you have to like, can I have a lift to the shops? I need to buy something.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's cool, man. Yeah. But you're staying in Amsterdam now?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. At least a lot of stuff is close by then.
Yeah. No, it's been a great city. I've been staying at an Airbnb for the first while, and after my quarantine period, at least I could see some of the sites. And I mean, it feels a bit weird. There's like nothing really open yet.
Exactly.
So I'm excited to see when things start opening up a bit more, just to see a bit more of the city.
Yeah, I can imagine. But you also figured out your lease situation now then?
Yeah. I signed a lease last night and have the keys to a new apartment also.
Nice.
In Amsterdam. So really excited to get some furnishings in there. And
you're going to get it back.
Yeah. So I don't have to sleep on the floor.
Awesome, man. Yeah. And you also, obviously, with your whole move here, you started at a new company and a new job. Yeah. How's that been so far?
It's been really good. Yeah. I've had a really nice onboarding process, even though most of it has been virtual.
Yeah.
But at least, being able to come into the office, it's also nice every now and then. You meet some new people and everything. But it's been really nice so far. Really nice people in the team that I'm working with. And we did an escape room as one of our onboarding things as well.
But that wasn't remote then, right?
That was remote. So it was a virtual escape room.
Oh, okay. And then how did that go? Did you click through a lot of things, or was it?
So how it works is they've got someone that like gives you a whole bunch of clues, and then you as a team on Zoom have to sort of figure out these clues and go to certain social media pages and decipher these clues. And then if you decipher a clue, then you get the next one, and it's all on a timer. And then eventually you get to the end. Yeah. And then your your time is taken into account.
Okay, cool. Did you guys finish fast?
Yeah, I think we came second out of all teams that have ever competed. So
awesome. So it's like an online kind of scavenger hunt, maybe?
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. I'm guessing remote onboarding is way different than actually real life onboarding.
Yeah.
But I'm glad it went well. How's the business life here compared to South Africa? Is it very different?
I think in a lot of ways it's similar, and then it's different in a lot of ways as well. I think in South Africa, depending on where you work depending what industry you work in, the culture changes for the job.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of industries in South Africa, you get a very small group of people that work really hard, and then another group of people that don't work hard at all.
Oh, okay.
And then so like there's a lot of stress on the people that actually work hard, and then the people that don't work hard actually, they don't work hard.
Exactly.
So. Whereas here, what I've noticed is that like everyone pulls their weight and works really hard the same. So it does reduce stress on certain people as well, because you're not trying to carry everyone else through your through your job. But yeah, I mean, it's been great. Also, the directness of the Dutch, as I mentioned before.
You're a fan.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it, because now if you like coding something and it's not right or not up to scratch, they'll tell you. It's not like, okay, yeah, it looks fine, and then you're left with, so I think overall, like you can work together quite well to get a good product out.
Yeah, might be more effective than just circling around the problem.
Exactly, you'd rather just tackle it directly.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of a company structure in which some people work not as hard as others. Did you find yourself in such a situation as well?
So my previous company, actually, I was quite privileged. I was in a startup, and I think the startup culture is quite different.
Yeah.
So it was like a small team, and we all sort of worked quite closely together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was there for about 2 years, and that was nice, because it was quite a similar culture to here.
Yeah.
In terms of the work environment. But the company that I was at before then, they were like quite a big company, quite a corporate kind of environment. And there was a lot of inefficiencies in some areas. And
I can imagine.
So that wasn't as ideal. But what also was nice at that company was that, like, because it was, I had a lot of time to learn skills for myself as well. And that's actually where I taught myself coding.
Oh, nice.
Because I've got a background in mechanical engineering, actually, with my degree. But I've always had a fascination for programming.
Nice.
And so at this company, I thought, well, I've got some extra time as well. So let me teach myself programming.
But then what did you get hired for? Not to do the programming part of the job?
Yeah, so it was I got hired as a mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
But the department which I worked in was a mechatronics department.
Cool.
So there were a lot of programmers involved in that process, because there was a lot of like robotics and things related to that. And there was actually a lack of programmers that were needed for a lot of the things that we were doing, especially some of the web interfaces we needed to build. And so I was already teaching myself a bit of programming. And so I said, well, there's this gap here. Let me try fill it. So I offered my programming skills and started working. And then within like 2 months, 90% of the work I was doing was programming.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so you completely made that switch then on the job. Nice.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges to actually teaching yourself how to program?
I think you sort of need to have a passion for it. Obviously, if you're just picking up programming as a job or as something that you need to do, I think you'll struggle a lot to teach yourself. And so I really have this itch for problem solving, and I've had that since my degree, because actually in my degree we did a programming module in my second year, and I was like, I'd never done programming before that, and so when we were doing Python, and when we started, I was like, sheesh, this is scratching that itch that I've always had to solve problems. And so I thought, sure, I really want to do this. But in any case, I'm studying mechanical engineering, so maybe I'll find some way to scratch that itch elsewhere. But then, like, it sort of was at the back of my mind the whole time. And then coming into work at my first company, where it was a sort of a mechatronics department, I was like, okay, there's an opportunity. Actually, let me try make a switch. And because I had that passion for problem solving, I think it like really sort of was quite an easy process. in sort of teaching myself how to code.
Nice.
But yeah, obviously there was a lot of challenges, and when you see an application for the first time and you've got done your basic hello world script, you're like, oh, what on earth's going on? So it is nice to have a mentor. So when I started at my next company, I had a mentor for the first 6 or 7 months that I was there.
Awesome.
Who was able to like teach me a lot of the ropes of programming and working with a larger size application. And so that was really helpful to have.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine having a mentor when you actually start out is amazing, because then you get your proper code reviews in. And you can actually be effective more that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome, man. It sounds like when you actually picked everything up and moved, it went quite smoothly. Were there any bumps in the road even?
You're talking about moving to the Netherlands?
Yeah.
I think the biggest ones are related to my wife coming across. So I'm here by myself for the next 2 months or so.
Yeah.
And so I think that process takes a bit longer. And then also it's getting used to like the way that everything runs here. I think the Dutch run a lot through the postal service.
Yeah.
Where South Africa doesn't have we do have a postal service, but no one uses it really.
Oh, okay.
Because it doesn't really have funding. But so everything runs through the postal service. So the main issue that I had was you need a BSN number in the Netherlands, and you need to have an address to get a BSN number.
Yep.
And you need a bank account to get an address, and you need a BSN number to get a bank account. So there's this loop of stuff where you have to go through, but it's this infinite loop. So it's a bit challenging walking those ropes. And then obviously there's the fact that learning a new language, although it is exciting, it is also challenging as well.
Nice.
So I really want to learn Dutch. But it does have its challenges as well. Communication can be sometimes a bit scary when someone says something to you in Dutch and you're like,
Yeah.
But it's all part of the process. But I think moving countries is stressful and it is challenging, but it is exciting as well.
Awesome. Do you think without the catalyst of your girlfriend actually getting into the free university here, you would have also made that step and that move?
I don't know if we would have done it as soon.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned before, it was always been a dream of mine to be here. So I think we weren't really thinking about it. I think it was more something like, okay, we'll get to it in 2 to 3 years or whatever. But I think actually this has been the perfect time to come across.
Yeah.
So I'm actually very thankful that we decided to take the move now. Yeah,
awesome. I mean, it sounds fairly easy then. You go, especially since you're in the IT business, you can do an online application pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But how did you actually come to this company? Why is it this company and not a different one?
So I think the core values of this company was what really stood out to me at the beginning. And so I when I was doing research for companies in the Netherlands and I came across Xebia as well, it was like, oh wow. This company actually resonates with a lot of what I feel as a developer. And as I mentioned before, like I taught myself programming. So I've got this sort of passion to grow more. And the previous company where I was at, I had a mentor for the first 6 months. But after that, it was just me running this whole application for this company, which was challenging. And so a lot of the stuff I taught myself and I gained a lot of experience that way. But it's also, you also learn to do things in a specific way, which might not be the best way to do things. Yeah. So to work for a company that is able to have, or it has a lot of experience and able to convey that experience to you or teach you a bunch of things, that is something that I was definitely looking for in a company. Nice. Especially if you're moving countries as well. Then that's very important, because having someone who can share their experience with, even in the country, also with coding, then that's very valuable. And so that's how I decided upon this company.
Oh, awesome, man. Yeah. And you mentioned you went through about 4 talks with 1 technical interview.
Yes.
I've talked to Urs actually on the first episode here, and we talked about kind of the duration of the process, and that it is kind of challenging to a lot of people.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the way companies hire people in tech?
I think it is. It has its challenges, but I think it's also because I've also been on the other side, hiring a replacement for me in South Africa for the company where I was leaving. And I think it's difficult, especially when we're doing everything virtually. It's difficult to gauge the caliber of a person, not just their technical skills, but also their character through Zoom or through any sort of platform. And so I think it's important for a lot of people to get input on a candidate, but also that gives its challenges to candidates, because now if you're interviewing with 5 companies, you've got interviews every day.
Yeah, for sure.
And you've got to work on technical assessments the whole time. So, I mean, for me, I'm grateful that the first company I interviewed for was the one that I chose.
Nice.
But I think if the process had gone on for another month or 2 months even, it might have been quite exhausting. But I understand where it's coming from, because the company also needs to gauge the character of the person that's coming in.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, awesome, man. Do you think if you didn't have the dream to come here, any other company or country would have been as easy as Holland, or is Holland a bit easier in this case?
I think in this case, it's been it'll be a bit easier. Mainly, I've got a Dutch passport, which is very helpful. And then also, I mean, apart from the English countries like the UK or those places, Dutch is quite similar to Afrikaans, which is one of the languages we speak in South Africa. Yeah. So I think about 60 or I don't know the exact stats, so I'm just making it up. But
no worries.
About 60% of the vocabulary is quite similar. Yeah. And so you can sort of, if you can speak Afrikaans and you compare it to Dutch, you can sort of understand Dutch if you speak Dutch slowly. Yeah. So that is a big advantage, because I think a lot of the pronunciation is also quite similar. So you don't have to learn all that and all the new vocabulary. Exactly. Straight off the bat.
Yeah,
and
it's baseline.
Yeah, so it's not like it's a completely different language. It's there's a lot of overlap, which is really great.
Yeah, I can imagine. Awesome, man. So circling back to the cultural differences, because we kind of scratched the surface there with the Dutch being a bit more direct. Yeah. What are some of the other differences you noticed?
I think just one of the things I've noticed is South Africans are generally, I mean, I've only been here for a few days, and it might also be COVID. So South Africa is a very diverse country. So there's 11 official languages, and so a lot of cultures involved. Whereas here, I think it is slightly more homogenous. I think that's the word.
Nice.
And so I think in South Africa, we are quite sort of used to different cultures, like all sort of blending together. And so I think one of the things is that I'm going to learn a lot here, obviously with the different cultures. So I must say I haven't seen all the cultural differences yet. Yeah. I think South Africa, I've lived in my whole life, so I think everything seems quite new when I come here. The food is different, the way people communicate is different, and so it's a learning process, I think.
Awesome.
But yeah, I still don't know all 100%. I can tell you a bit about South African culture, but we, for instance, have to deal with a lot of sort of issues with our government and things like that. So, for instance, one of the things in South Africa that we have is something called load shedding. Okay. Which is the electricity providers in South Africa don't provide enough electricity for the whole country. Okay. So they cut electricity to certain places throughout the day.
Oh, really?
And they call it load shedding because you sort of shed the load between different sectors. So all the work and everything has to revolve around when you're not going to have power for, say, 4 hours of the day. Okay. So you'd know that, okay, between 12 and 2 today, we're not going to have electricity.
Really?
So then you have to plan, okay, well, we won't have internet then. So I won't be able to do work or attend meetings or anything during that time, or I'll have to go and travel to a coffee shop somewhere else to do work. Yeah. But a lot of companies also then will have to invest a lot of money in buying generators that are diesel power generators.
I can imagine.
So that they have at least power during those times when there's load shedding.
Does the load shedding happen in different zones, or is it actually, can they target it specifically towards an area?
Yeah, so they targeted specifically towards an area. So there's like an app you can download, which then has
Really?
your area. So you type your address in and you say, okay, well, today I'm going to have power between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, and then again between 9 and 10 at night.
And it also changes?
And it changes, yeah.
Okay.
So it depends on, so there's different stages. So we would have, sometimes it rains a lot in South Africa, and the coal heaps that they use to power the power stations get wet.
Yeah.
And so then there's more load shedding. So then they would say, okay, we're going to stage 4 load shedding, which would then mean you've got more load shedding and it's more regular. So then you would have 4 2-hour slots a day, which would then be during the day, during the evening, and then in the middle of the night somewhere where you won't have power.
Yeah.
Which can be quite annoying and can be a bit inconvenient as well.
From a company perspective, do you also plan then your meetings? Let's say if you have a normal Scrum cycle with your planning and your refinement, would you plan it during the load shedding?
Yeah, so then someone might drop out of the call at some point and be like, oh, well, he's got load shedding now. So we sort of, I think everyone in South Africa understands it and is used to it.
Yeah.
And also the internet there is not as reliable. So everyone sort of has this mutual understanding that if someone's internet isn't working and they're not speaking to you, that it's actually just normal. We just accept it and move on from there.
Yeah.
So in South Africa, we've got this saying called 'n boer maak 'n plan, which would be similar to what you would say in Dutch. It means a farmer makes a plan.
Exactly.
And so in South Africa, we used to making plans with sometimes our resources aren't that readily available, so we have to make a plan around it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So then, I mean, also from a professional company, every company has to deal with it. It's on a whole country basis.
Yeah, it's a whole country basis. So every company has to deal with load shedding. I think also another thing that South Africa has that's different is that South Africa is obviously not as wealthy as the Netherlands. It's a third world country.
Yeah,
and so a lot of our planning and stuff actually is more focused on budget.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing I noticed as well doing my technical interviews was that when I planned out my assessment that I had to do, I said, well, if you're building this app on a budget, this is the stuff I would use. And then they were like, what?
I love that you gave it your own spin.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
So like I think in South Africa, like a lot of the stuff we actually plan and do is like very... like we have to work around very restricted budgets sometimes. And then obviously the sort of audience that we target is also very different.
Yeah.
So like if you're building an e-commerce platform in South Africa, you're going to be targeting not necessarily the high-end products. It'll be more like, okay, well, people have basic needs, and a lot of the people that actually are in South Africa don't have access to internet or a phone. So your platform actually has to... it can't be your sole source of income or your sole sort of way of doing business, because you actually have to look at who the target audience is. And the majority of South Africa actually doesn't have access to internet or even a smartphone, which is quite crazy.
Yeah, man. Then probably the way of living is also different there completely.
Yeah.
Than how it is here.
Yeah, no, it is completely different. I think there's a massive line between the rich and the poor in South Africa.
Yeah.
Where the rich are very rich and the poor are very poor. So it's quite sad to see that sometimes because I mean I love South Africa, but it has got its issues. Whereas I think it's not as obvious the rich and the poor. And I think also there's a lot of in South Africa there's a lot of the rich actually want to display their wealth a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's one of the cultural differences I see here, whereas the rich actually live quite modestly in a way.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to summarize it, in South Africa, you have higher highs and lower lows.
Exactly.
When it comes to wealth, then.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned before your dream was always to move to Holland here. Did that impact your dream?
I think all South Africans have a concern about the future of the country.
Yeah.
I think you'd be naive to not be concerned about it. Like we've had a lot of issues with government, a lot of issues just with wealth in general, and where the country's going. So I think a lot of South Africans have considered immigrating, and I have too, but I think that wasn't the biggest driving factor behind coming here. Like I think it does play a part. Like you often wonder, like, what is the future of my kids going to look like one day in South Africa? And that is something you think about. But I love South Africa, and I didn't leave South Africa because I hated it or I was sort of fearful of what's going to happen there. Yeah, it was more that like the Netherlands is a place where I want to be, and it's a sort of a beautiful country where I really feel that I should go there.
Yeah, I like that. That's more the positive versus the negative.
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't want to run away from something.
Exactly.
I'd rather run towards something. Yeah.
That makes way more sense. Yeah. How's it been moving here? I mean, you were completely alone initially, right?
Yes.
And your wife is gonna fly over. Hopefully soon. But your friends and family are gonna stay behind in South Africa.
Yeah.
What's that dynamic been so far?
So I think with technology, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
So obviously right now it's a bit tough because you can't have someone you love close to you. Yeah. And so that part is tough, especially with my wife being across there. But technology makes it really great to be able to do video calls on a regular basis.
For sure.
I think I actually do more video calls now than what I did in South Africa. So I speak way more to my parents right now than what I did when living there, nice. Which is nice. But obviously it is challenging to not actually see them in person. Yeah. But I think in the end, it's not that far. Like for instance, my wife's parents, they live in Durban in South Africa. Yeah. And if you were to drive from Durban to where we were living, that's a 10-hour drive.
Oh, really?
All the way up to Pretoria.
Man.
So it's quite a long drive. But it's the same length flight if you fly directly from Johannesburg to Amsterdam. So I think in the end, it still feels pretty close. Yeah. Even though it is way further, obviously.
Yeah, I like the way you put it because it's the same time difference, just a different vehicle of transportation, basically.
Exactly, yeah. And an airplane, I mean, you fly through the night, but I mean, it's way more comfortable than sitting in a car as well.
Especially when it's kind of empty.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Time zone's the same as well, right?
Yeah, so that's helped a lot. Like I know I've got a bunch of family and friends that have moved to the United States. Yeah. And then to communicate with them is actually quite challenging because you are going to bed and they're waking up and getting ready for work.
Yeah, you got to hit that niche with regards to time.
Yeah, so this is very limited period where you can actually talk. So I think that's made the whole process quite a lot easier because now if I'm sort of want to see something interesting during the day, I can just be like, okay, well, have a look at this and quickly do a video call and show the cool views that I'm seeing, which is really nice.
Awesome. Yeah. What's your plan for actually, I mean, you've moved here. What's your plan for staying here? Your wife's going to fly over. You plan to actually stay here for the rest of your life? Or at some point, will you move back or even to a different country?
Yeah, so that's the plan. The plan is that we permanently move across here and integrate fully here. That is the long-term plan. Obviously, you don't know what could happen in the future. Yeah. But yeah, I think that was always the plan with us coming here. It wasn't like a temporary thing. And I mean, to be honest, like the admin around moving countries is a lot already. I wouldn't want to do it twice within the span of 5 years. Yeah. So I think that's definitely the plan. I want to learn Dutch properly. And our potential children one day as well, send them to Dutch schools and everything. I think it's important to be fully integrated where you are.
Great.
So I don't want to come here and be an expat the rest of my life. I think the end goal is to fully integrate into society. And
awesome.
That obviously takes time. So I don't want to be jumping around too much. And
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, do you plan to learn Dutch then through classes and all that sort of stuff, or kind of day to day?
Yeah,
pick it up as you go?
I do want to do some classes as well. Yeah, I have been doing some lessons by myself on Duolingo.
Okay,
I've been doing that since the beginning of the year, actually, since we sort of were thinking about coming.
Nice,
and that's been pretty helpful.
Has it really helped? Because I mean, I've tried Duolingo as well. And I learned stuff that I would never use.
Yeah. Yeah, it does teach you some useless stuff. I think one of the phrases that Duolingo taught me was, ik ben een appel.
Ah, exactly.
But like, I don't know. I don't think anyone would ever say that. I don't know if it's a saying.
It means you're an apple.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't mean anything, so it's a pretty useless thing to say. But it helped a little bit. As I mentioned, Afrikaans probably is the biggest help because the vocabulary is quite similar. But learning with Duolingo did help with a few of the differences, I guess. But ideally, I'd like to take classes, and I'll do that once I'm fully settled. Yeah. And have some furniture in my apartment.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you raised then bilingual as well? Because you've mentioned Afrikaans and English.
Yes.
As the two main spoken languages in South Africa.
Yes. Yeah. So I was raised bilingual. So my grandfather came from the Netherlands, as I mentioned. So he spoke Afrikaans to my mom.
Okay.
And then my dad was very English. So it was, they speak Afrikaans to each other, but we spoke English at home. But up until I was 6 years old, I spoke Afrikaans.
Okay.
And so I'm pretty bilingual. Most of my friends actually were Afrikaans up until I was at university, or actually even during university, I was in an Afrikaans residence. Got some interesting stories about that. If you want to hear about university residences in South Africa,
yeah, sure.
But I'll maybe tell you some stories. But in the residences in South Africa, they it's still quite it's like the Wild West in a way. That's the best way to describe it.
Okay.
So we have this thing. We have a millie. Is that a word in Dutch? Which is like
not that I know. No.
A corn.
Okay.
So those corn.
Those corns on the cob.
Yeah. So in South Africa we call it a millie.
Okay.
And so we had a field of millies below our residence in at university.
Yeah.
And so the first years are tasked with guarding this field of corn.
Okay.
And
people try and steal it, or what?
Yeah, because the other residences will come in.
Okay.
And they'll try and steal these corn.
Middies.
Yeah. And so it was a big issue of pride. So we have to guard our corn.
Yeah.
So the first years were tasked with that. So you would get a slot at from 2 to 6 in the morning, or from 11 till 2.
Really?
At night, and then you'd go sit outside in the cold and watch,
just guarding your
just
corn.
Watching the corn. Yeah. So then, if someone would try and come and steal it, you would go and shout a secret keyword to the rest of your residents, and then everyone would come and run down and start intimidating the people there.
Okay.
But yeah, that was there's quite a lot of interesting stories that we learned in South Africa. Yeah.
Cool, man. Cool. So then, obviously, you're going to stay here for a while, and you're going to raise your kids bilingual as well.
Yeah.
It's going to be Dutch and English, and you're going to forego the Afrikaans?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So we'll most likely, I think it's best to speak your best language to your kids.
Yeah.
So we'll probably speak English to them, but then sending them to Dutch schools as well would be ideal.
Not international schools?
No, Dutch schools, yeah. Yeah, I think that's the best way to teach your kids Dutch as well. Yeah. I think because kids learn languages much quicker than adults do.
Absolutely.
And so, hopefully by the time we have kids, we can speak Dutch. But I think that'll help a lot more.
Yeah.
So, we'll speak English to them, but Dutch schools are the way to go.
Yeah. As a person, how far do you plan the future ahead?
I think I tend to look quite a lot more to the future.
Oh, okay.
So I actually have to sometimes bring my mind back to the now where I'm living in, because I tend to look, well, what's going to happen in 5 years' time? Yeah. I don't think I plan everything out per se. I don't really make lists or anything like that, but I tend to think a lot about the future. Yeah. And so, as you can tell, I'm already thinking about kids and Dutch schools.
That's completely fine.
So, and so I think the move to wasn't actually something that was part of what I was planning to happen so soon. So it sort of came quite unexpectedly. Yeah. Which is good sometimes. I think it was sort of not what I expected, but it's actually much better than what I sort of envisioned it to be.
Exactly. I love that you guys came across it and you completely took that opportunity. And now you're here. Yeah. Right? Props to that. Not a lot of people can actually do that or will take that step.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful that it came across as it did. And actually a lot of the sort of circumstances around this aligned perfectly. Yeah. Also the timing of me getting this job was actually perfect because my wife needs a visa to come across.
Yeah.
The timing was ideal because her university starts in September. So sorting all this stuff out now and getting a house ready now is actually the perfect time to get ready so that when she arrives, she can have like a little bit of time and then it's the university starting. So
yeah. How does she get the visa? 'Cause you mentioned kind of the unending circle of things you need, which circles back around like a circle does.
Yeah.
But what's kind of the first step you've taken towards that?
So we actually went the route of getting an immigration lawyer involved, just to make the admin a bit less on our side. So that's been really helpful. So the main process is you go to IND, which is the naturalization service here in the Netherlands, and I show them that I'm a Dutch citizen, and then after that we need to submit a whole bunch of documents, but legalized documents. So you first need to get your original birth certificates and your original marriage certificates and all these things, and then you take them to the Department of International Relations in South Africa, and they put a wax seal on it saying that this is now a legalized official document that can be used worldwide. Yeah. And then that document you submit to IND on this side. And then my wife has to do the Dutch Basic Civic Integration exam, which is like a test on Dutch reading. Yep. So it's like a comprehension test kind of thing where you'd read a paragraph and then you'd have to answer questions about it.
She does that immediately or in a few weeks, for example?
She's doing that in June, the middle of June somewhere. Yeah. So she'll write that, and then it's also a speaking one, which is then someone will ask you a question in Dutch, which you listen to, and then you respond back in Dutch. And then the final one is a culture one, which then would ask you a bunch of questions about Dutch culture, so that's those are the three tests, and she has to pass all of them.
She's been studying then for that?
Yeah, she's been studying really hard. As I think, like if we didn't have an Afrikaans background, it would have been really challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine if you need to do all that.
Yeah, because before I even started looking at Dutch, I could still basically make out what something is when I read it. Yeah, I can still basically make out what it's saying. Speaking is obviously a bit more different and a bit more challenging, and listening, especially if people are speaking quite fast. Yeah, it's difficult to follow. But I think the Afrikaans background really, really helps a lot because there's only a little bit more that you have to learn to pass the exam because it's not actually that difficult. Yeah. It's like they ask you, you go to the shop and you buy, and then it's a question mark, and then you say, well, brood in milk. Exactly. And then, you take it from there. So it's not that challenging, but I mean, you don't want to fail that exam.
Exactly. Well, do you know what happens if you fail it?
You can take it again, but
with some time in between.
Yeah. So we booked this exam like probably in March.
Really?
And the first available date was now the 15th of June.
Okay.
So there seems to be like a 3-month sort of waiting list to do the test. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously if you fail it, then you have to book then.
Exactly.
So, I know she won't fail it, but it is always a bit of extra stress because you know that it's going to delay coming here. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What you told me also, looking at the future, you're living in Amsterdam right now, right?
Yeah.
And I've noticed with my friends that are not from here, whenever they try and speak Dutch, people will just take over and talk in English there as well. I think it's kind of Amsterdam specific or more the broader known cities here in Holland. Do you plan on staying in Amsterdam as well?
Probably not. I think the majority of people that I've spoken to actually don't live in Amsterdam. I think it's way more expensive than the other cities around.
It is. Yeah.
And so I think the majority of people live either in the surrounding cities or even like the smaller towns surrounding those cities as well. So ideally, I think we would probably move away from Amsterdam. The reason we actually are there now is because of the studies at the university. Yeah. But I think after that's done, then the plan would be to maybe buy a house somewhere else, which I think that's quite important. So I don't know where yet. So if you've got any recommendations, you must please tell me.
Yeah, I'll let you know after the show. No worries.
Yeah. So
cool, man. So one of the final questions then, let's say I am a guy in South Africa and I want to move to Holland. What will be kind of the steps I would go through? Let's say I don't have a Dutch passport to make it a bit harder.
Okay. So if you don't have a Dutch passport, you first need to find a job or actually get accepted into a university.
Yeah.
something like that. And then you can go about getting a visa to come across.
Yeah.
So if you get accepted into university, though, it's they do the visa application for you, which is great.
Awesome.
I think also if you go via a company, they also do the visa application.
Nice.
So I think South Africa specifically is like, even if you're not planning on traveling in the next 5 years, go and get your documents out of the government departments, because that can take very, very long.
Yeah.
And so then just plan ahead, because doing it very quickly without any planning ahead would actually be quite a challenge, and you might end up being stuck somewhere.
You don't want to have that.
Yeah,
happen.
you don't want to have that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
No problem.
Beyond coding.
From your sponsors, Xebia, creating digital leaders.